They left Bainbridge Island at 3 a.m., Mench and his son, on the ebb to Port Townsend, then sailed into the Straits of Juan de Fuca under clear skies, headed for the San Juans, just like they'd done for years. He'd crossed the Straits 35 times before in the Danish-built Spidsgadder Pia that he'd restored from derelict to showpiece. A boat builder and boat builder's son, he grew up on the water and learned. A wooden boat's a living thing with history back to the trees. And over the years, he'd come to belong to Pia as much as she to him. Late that afternoon, just 2 miles short of Safe Harbor, a sudden storm blew up. The wind rose from 5 to 30 knots, and they were caught in violent currents off Lopez Island in a fight for their lives. Sails down, Mench battled every wave, one hand on the tiller, the other on the combing glasses, crusted with salt and not enough engine to keep them off the rocks. Finally, they called for help, and the Coast Guard arrived with a helicopter and boat. In seas so rough they couldn't approach, they'd have to abandon ship. From the chopper, a diver with a basket, one by one, they jumped into the waves and swam toward him as Pia fell off to the wind. That night, 6 miles distant, she was pounded on a rocky spit, then rolled and sank at high tide. The next day, refloated and towed to port, Pia was trucked to a barn near Olympia, where her resurrection and his redemption would cost nearly 2 years. Of course he'd rebuild, though he wondered, age 63, if it might be the last job left in him. Of course he'd rebuild. It was an obligation. To the men who built Pia, and all the vessels like her back to the Vikings in the oak, pine, copper, and iron they fashioned into sculpture, then set free to water and wind. An obligation to his son so he might understand what perseverance means. An obligation because it had to be done alone. A cross he'd carry, a task he was destined for all along. Much of the wood was already waiting, gathered over years as if just for this. And the thousands of hours building, repairing, and dreaming of boats, waiting too, like tools handed down from his father, waiting to rebuild the jewel box marvel he let go that night, now full of sand and rock. Each task a challenge. Cockpit combing smashed, cabin sides cracked, canvas top torn, rails broken, rudder shredded, wiring shot, and soon his girlfriend had left him too. Up the ladder and down again. Broken bulkheads, benches, drawers, and cabinets. He pulled 600 nails from damaged planks, frames fractured and cracked, replaced one all the way from bottom to shear clamp, sistered the rest with curved grain locust, up the ladder and down again. So time passed. Weekends after work, vacations, more than 2,000 hours before the end, and every moment a challenge to brain and damaged back. Up the ladder and down, it has to be done, singing in his head. Hardest were the keel bolts, 6 in all, the shortest 2 feet, the longest more than 4. Each a trophy, hard won. Keel bolts hold iron ballast to wood, attach to floor timbers and frames. They oxidize, swell, become welded to iron, fused to oak. A wooden boat's a living thing, all connected, never meant to be torn asunder. First 4 were easy, too, but the others wouldn't budge. Not with special jigs, drills, magnets, nor heat. Ours with a sledge yielded only 3/4 inch. Near despair, he turned to another task and so kept on. Finally, removing the 1.5 ton ballast keel to get at him, and even then, it took months. And then that spring, he woke with left arm and side of face paralyzed by a stroke. Another test. Maybe it would be his last job, but it wasn't complete yet, and so after 24 hours in the ICU, he was back on the ladder again. Made him think, though, about his hands, all they know, work they've done, and tools, the story of his life in them. Drills, jacks, clamps, mallets, planes, chisels, spoke shaves, all whistling sharp and wax slick. And the long planes for boom and mast, their 50-foot shavings curling behind him, coat after coat of varnish, and always another task. Up the ladder and down, it has to be done, singing in his head. Until finally, on a sunny spring morning, they carried Pia to the sea. Surrounded by men who understood what work meant, Mench and his son together on deck, he felt closer to her than ever. And when they crossed the straits to safe harbor in Watma Bay, their destination before the shipwreck, his redemption was complete, the cross lifted from his back. Or so, for a moment, it seemed. Because a wooden boat's a living thing, an obligation, work from which he'll never be free. And in the end, he's alone with what he's built, what he wrecked, and what he saved. A fate waiting for any who dare sail their dreams on unpredictable seas.